Canterbury regional winner. He was a national finalist as a Year 12 at this competition last year. He's the member of a college jazz band, concert band, orchestra, and the Phoenix Choir. A keen musician who plans to enroll at the CPIT Jazz School in Christchurch next year. Please welcome from Ashburton College, James Rance.
When war was declared on the 3rd of September 1939, no one in New Zealand escaped the consequences. But while much has been written about the experiences of the men who fought overseas, little has been said of the courage, strength, and resourcefulness of the women they left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to acknowledge these inspiring and heroic women who were the wives, sweethearts, mothers, and sisters of the New Zealand men fighting for our freedom thousands of miles away. The declaration of war brought about a terrible dilemma for these women: their patriotism versus their love for their men. They were caught in a dreadful struggle of wanting and not wanting their sons, brothers, husbands, and fathers to go away to war. While they were publicly celebrated for sending their men, they privately suffered with a deep sense of powerlessness as they watched their loved ones leave our shores. As thousands of men went overseas or into camps, New Zealand women began their own long battle with the dreariness of war. Young women who'd been brought up to expect the support of a man suddenly found they must be mother and father to their children. Domestic responsibilities included all those tasks, even those that had been considered men's work. Many women had never contributed to or controlled the finances of the home. Now, there was no choice but to learn. Women were essentially alone. So, these women rolled up their sleeves and they began. They worked on the land, in the factories, the shops, offices, and hospitals. They organised, they volunteered, they raised funds, and they enlisted for the services. In the home, they made do with fewer incomes, less amenities, and always a constant uncertainty. For these women waiting at home, the shadow of apparently random death became a daily reality. But for some of these women, they had been here before. Many of them had only just recovered from the loss of their brothers and fathers during the First World War to again suffer the trauma as wives and mothers of the Second. When news of the death of their loved ones was received, they couldn't imagine how they had died. They had no idea of when, where, or how, except that they died as a result of battle in a place they had never seen and probably would never see. Now, in this age of immediate telecommunications, it is incredible to realise that those at home during the war did not have any access to the sort of information we have now. Many women lived in the country with no telephone, television, video, library, or internet to provide any details about their loved ones. When you were informed of a death, there were no grief counsellors or crisis helplines. There wasn't even a traditional funeral. Take, for instance, the experience of Pamela Quill, who was informed in 1946 via telegram that her husband Paul was missing. 9 years later, after remarriage, she was informed he was found. In her own words, he didn't say Paul was killed or anything. He said, but Paul was found. You can imagine all the things that went through my mind then. Was he found dead or alive? Had he gone mad? Had he decided he didn't want to see me anymore? Was I a bigamist? Was he still living somewhere? Was he with somebody else? What had happened? And the personnel man was looking at me in a very perplexed way, saying, but I thought you knew. I didn't know. I'd never heard. Now take a moment to imagine how this would feel if it was your loved one. How would you react? How could you react? Coping with the dual role of mum and dad was also incredibly hard, and a clear example of this was Mabel Waititi, a dairy truck driver in World War II. Again, in her words, "I was unloading a 44-gallon petrol drum one day, and as I wheeled it around, I felt a crack in my chest. Oh, it was painful. So I rushed into the hospital and I told them, I've got to be back on that truck again in the morning. So they put a very wide sticking plaster on. It was good. But as I was coming down the steps, I realised my 2.5-year-old son was still on the breast. So I went back. There's something wrong. What? And I said, my son, he's still on the breast. Well, what we did eventually was cut some holes to the plaster for the nipples. Of course, my son was quite happy with that. But as the war raged on, the initial spirited enthusiasm for that war was fast waning. In the words of ailing Andrew, who watched the arrival of an army invalid train, I noticed an elderly woman looking for someone when the train pulled up. She found him, obviously her son. He put his head on her shoulder and wept, while she held him, trying to be brave, and kept her tears back. They went away together, she trying to look anywhere but at his dreadful empty sleeve. The grief and mourning experienced by New Zealand women was often acutely private and only expressed behind closed doors. Though there were public expressions of nationalism and noble sacrifice, this did not resolve the agony and heartbreak our women were intimately experiencing. The surviving women today look back and find those years of their lives quite incredible. What was it all about, they ask. And they think of the husbands who never lived to grow old, the fathers the children never knew, the sons dead before they were really men, gone forever. These women learned to live from day to day. They lived with tears and laughter and with prayers for a miracle. In the face of terrible adversity, they were and are a shining example for women of all generations and an inspiration to us all. This is to the woman who stood helplessly on that dock, waving goodbye to their loved ones. You must remember this, a kiss is still a kiss, a sigh is still a sigh, the fundamental things apply as time goes by.